Did you know we might be wrong about hieroglyphs being cracked? For thousands of years, people stared at those tiny owls, eyes and spirals, convinced they were a silent code no one could ever read. Then the Rosetta Stone was found, Champollion matched Greek to Egyptian, and the story seemed finished. Mystery solved, alphabet unlocked. But old legends tell a different story, and the walls of Egypt quietly disagree. Imagine standing in a dark temple corridor. The air is cold and still. Your flashlight slides over columns, then catches a wall packed with carved signs, falcons, cobras, stars, strange seated gods. Most of us grew up believing that, thanks to the 1800s, we can now simply read these lines like a newspaper. But what really happened to that mystery? Why do experienced Egyptologists still pause at certain passages and admit, we can say the sounds, but we are not fully sure what the text is actually doing? Hieroglyphs are not just letters. They are sound signs, pictures, and silent guides all at once. A single word can be spelled with phonetic symbols, crowned with a picture that stands for the whole idea, and finished with a tiny, unspoken sign called a determinative. That last sign never gets pronounced, yet it can shift the meaning toward magic, the body, the afterlife, or the realm of the gods. What kind of knowledge hides in a writing system that speaks to the ear, the eye, and something invisible behind both? Welcome back to the channel. Here, we explore the mysteries, history, and forgotten lore of ancient Egypt, slowly and calmly, so you can relax, unwind, and drift off while learning about one of the most fascinating civilizations in human history. From the pyramids and hidden chambers beneath the sands, to the gods, pharaohs, and ancient stories carved into temple walls along the Nile. If you enjoy relaxing history like this, consider subscribing and joining us for more journeys into the ancient world. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's return to the sands of Egypt. According to the stories carved in stone, words themselves were a force called Heka, ritual power. The same symbols that told a scribe how to pronounce a name could be used by priests in dark chambers to open gates in the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. Some texts, like the pyramid texts and coffin texts, read like technical manuals for the soul's journey, filled with spells that still have no agreed, coherent translation. We can follow the grammar, we can list the vocabulary, yet the purpose of certain lines remains a mystery. Champollion's breakthrough with the Rosetta Stone created a powerful myth that once the code was broken, everything on the walls became transparent. But many specialists quietly admit that is not true. Some temple inscriptions are written in enigmatic or cryptographic hieroglyphs, where signs are deliberately altered or layered to hide sacred teachings from casual readers. These were not public announcements. They were passwords for initiates of temple schools. Most importantly, some of these messages were never meant to be merely read. They were designed to be activated, spoken, chanted, traced, and lived. So in this journey, we are not just asking what hieroglyphs say, we are asking what they were built to do, why certain spells still resist clear meaning, and whether these carved lines are the visible edge of a deeper language technology. What are we really missing? Framing the hieroglyphic mystery, this language technology really begins. Because here is the strange part. On paper, We cracked hieroglyphs 200 years ago with the Rosetta Stone. We can spell the names of pharaohs, we can label gods, titles, and dates. But stand in front of a temple wall, covered in lines of perfect carvings, and ask yourself, if we can read the words, why does the whole scene still feel unintelligible? Why does it feel like listening to a ritual in a language we only half understand? Did you know that in Egyptian writing, a single word is often three things at once: a sound, an image, and a silent hint? There are phonetic signs that work like letters, logograms that stand for entire words, and determinatives, those unspoken symbols at the end that quietly tell us, this is about the body, or this is about the afterlife, or this is dangerous magic. What happens when the most important part of the sentence is the part that was never meant to be pronounced? Most of us grew up believing hieroglyphs were just a picture alphabet, but old legends tell a different story. According to the stories, priests spoke of words of power, hekau, that did not just describe reality, but shaped it. What if the walls of a temple are less like a book and more like a control panel? What kind of knowledge is encoded when the same sign can be a sound in one line, a god in the next, and a hidden instruction to the initiate in the one after that? In this episode, we will walk straight into that mystery. We will look at how hieroglyphs actually work on the page and on the stone, where modern translations begin to fray, and why certain passages still read like encrypted code. We will ask why some determinatives seem to pull in mythic layers that no dictionary fully explains. And most importantly, we'll find out together whether the gaps in meaning are random or intentional. This takes us right into a living tension. Academic Egyptology treats hieroglyphs as a brilliant writing system. Complex, yes, but ultimately a way to record language. Esoteric traditions, especially those inspired by mystery schools, see something else: a symbolic technology designed to tune consciousness, guide the soul through gates, and anchor rituals in stone. Are these carvings simply religious texts, or are they also diagrams for inner journeys? To explore this without collapsing into either extreme, we will visit the great corpora of Egyptian sacred writing, the pyramid texts in the hidden chambers of Saqqara, the coffin texts painted inside wooden sarcophagi, the Book of the Dead scrolls that tried to map the journey through the Duat, and the cryptographic temple inscriptions that deliberately scramble signs as if to hide a secret curriculum. For thousands of years, these texts have whispered from the walls, yet there are spells no scholar fully agrees on. Some lines can be read aloud, but no one is certain what truly happens if they are lived. So in this series, think of us as a kind of modern mystery school, not to hand out easy answers, but to walk the corridors of this language with you. Stay with us until the end, and you will have a way to approach hieroglyphs not just as ancient text, but as living symbols that still invite initiation. From tourist postcards to temple walls, context and mythic reframing. So, let's step back for a moment. Most of us grew up with a simple picture of hieroglyphs. They're the ancient Egyptian writing system, carved on tomb walls, temple pylons, obelisks, and painted on fragile rolls of papyrus. A way to record history, list the victories of pharaohs, write down prayers to the gods, and spread royal propaganda across the Nile. In school, They feel almost decorative, tiny pictures that just happen to mean words. But what really happened on those walls? Did you know hieroglyphs are already more layered than the alphabet on this screen? They work on at least 3 levels at once. Some signs are phonetic, spelling out consonant sounds like a hidden skeleton of the word. Others are logograms, where a single symbol, an ankh, a falcon, a seated god, can stand for an entire word or idea. And then, at the end of many words, comes the strangest element of all, the determinative. A determinative is a silent classifier. It's never pronounced. It simply stands there, like a guardian at the gate of meaning, telling us whether this word is a place, a god, a kind of action, a dangerous animal, a fragment of the body. One spoken word, 3 layers, sound, image, and an unspoken hint about what realm it belongs to. Already, this is not a flat script. It is a small ritual in every line. For thousands of years, though, the Egyptians went even further. In their worldview, words were not neutral labels. They were forces. Hekau, words of power, were believed to sustain the car, guide the bar through the afterlife journey, and help stabilize the great balance of Ma'at itself. To speak a name correctly was to touch a being. To carve that name into stone was to anchor it across time. So when priests hammered hieroglyphs into granite, this was not just record keeping. It was a ritual act, a way of pinning invisible realities into the visible world. According to the stories, a spell half erased could weaken a spirit. A formula repeated in gold leaf could strengthen a king in the duat. And the temples where these texts appear were not only shrines, many were also houses of life, hidden schools and scriptoria where priests and scribes copied sacred books, studied medicine and astronomy, and learned to handle these dangerous words. Imagine long corridors lined with texts, inner chambers where initiates whispered lines from the pyramid texts or the book of coming forth by day, not just to memorize them, but to feel what they did to consciousness. Old legends tell a different story about those walls, that they were not just decoration for the dead, but pages in a curriculum of transformation. If the temples were classrooms and hieroglyphs were lessons, what kind of knowledge were these priests really training for? Most importantly, why encode that training in a language so few could truly read? We'll find out together, but first, we need to ask whether we even decoded this language as deeply as we think. Who was allowed to read the gods? Restricted access and spiritual stakes. If hieroglyphs were lessons, not decorations, then the next question is uncomfortable. Who was actually allowed into the classroom? Did you know that for thousands of years, full hieroglyphic literacy was treated almost like a state secret? Not everyone in Egypt walked around reading temple walls. Far from it. Most people lived their entire lives hearing the sacred texts, not seeing them. Farmers, artisans, even soldiers might recognize a few common signs, but the deep language of the gods belonged to a narrow circle. These were the scribes, the high priests, and the royal functionaries trained inside temple schools, behind massive pylons and within shaded courtyards. They spent years copying signs on potsherds, reciting word lists, and memorizing hymns until their hands and voices moved almost automatically. Old legends tell a different story than the modern idea of basic literacy. Today, Reading is something children learn in the first years of school. But what really happened in ancient Egypt was almost the opposite. To read hieroglyphs, especially the ritual and cryptographic forms carved deep in the stone, was not a common skill. It was a passport, a key to the afterlife, a direct line into the machinery of state power, where a single sign misplaced could change a tax record, a royal decree, or a funerary spell. According to the stories, the ultimate goal of this training was not just administrative competence, it was alignment with the cosmic order itself. These priests were expected to navigate the duat, to understand the hidden geography of the night sky and the underworld, to keep the gates between worlds properly opened and closed. Every sign they wrote in a tomb, every name they inscribed on a sarcophagus, was a tiny ritual engine designed to help a soul stand before judgment, speak the right words, and come forth by day among the blessed dead. Imagine being one of those young initiates. You are led at night into a hyper-style hall, the air cool and heavy with incense. Torches flicker against towering columns painted with stars. Shadows crawl over bands of carved signs high above you. A priest in linen and leopard skin raises the torch toward a horizontal line of hieroglyphs and whispers, "These are not stories, these are maps." Maps of the sky, maps of the duat, maps of states of consciousness that most people will never even hear described. Most importantly, not every map was drawn in plain language. Some temple walls hide their meanings behind what scholars now call enigmatic or cryptographic hieroglyphs. Signs altered, rearranged, or doubled, so that only someone trained in the hidden rules could unlock them. A falcon stands where a phonetic sign should be. A familiar word is written with strange, doubled symbols. To the uninitiated, it looks decorative. To the trained, it signals a deeper layer of ritual instruction or a dangerous name of power. What kind of knowledge needed that level of protection? What were these priests guarding so fiercely that they twisted their own writing system to conceal it? In the next section, we step closer to those encrypted walls and ask whether we have truly broken their code or only skimmed the surface of a much older mystery. The Lost Library of Thoth, Ancient Sources, and the Memory of Mystery Schools. To answer that, we have to visit a different kind of library, not a modern archive with shelves and catalogues. A legendary one, whispered about by priests and philosophers who walked among ruins that were already ancient. Did you know that when Greek and Roman writers talked about Egyptian wisdom, the Great Pyramid was already over 2,000 years old? For them, the Old Kingdom was as distant as the Middle Ages are for us. They wandered through fallen temples and half-buried chambers, asking the same question we ask today: who taught the first builders, and where did their knowledge go? One of the most important names attached to that question is Thoth, Jehuti to the Egyptians, the divine scribe. According to the stories, Thoth did not just write down laws and myths, he authored tens of thousands of sacred books. Some were said to be given openly to temple schools. Others were hidden, locked in secret chambers, or sealed inside statues where only initiates could retrieve them. A Hellenistic priest named Manetho, and later the Hermetic writers, preserved echoes of this tradition. They spoke of temple archives and a priestly curriculum guarded for thousands of years. By their time, the earliest hieroglyphic texts, the pyramid texts, carved inside Saqqara's stone chambers were already relics from a forgotten golden age. Old legends tell a different story from simple tomb building. They hint at a structured system of training that stretched back beyond memory. Clement of Alexandria, writing in the 2nd century CE, gives one of the most vivid glimpses. He describes Egyptian priests carrying a procession of sacred scrolls, the famous 42 Books of Thoth. These were not random myths. They mapped out rituals for the gods, hymns, laws, geometry, astronomy, medicine, the anatomy of the body, and, most importantly, the journey through the afterlife. In his account, different ranks of priests were entrusted with different volumes, as if each role in the mystery schools required its own layer of initiation. Temple walls confirm pieces of this picture. At Edfu and Dendera, inscriptions speak of primordial writings, kept in hidden libraries, copies of even older texts that were said to descend from the time of the gods. Imagine walking through those halls, knowing that some of the scrolls in the side rooms were believed to be direct transmissions from Thoth himself. But what really happened inside those libraries? What kind of knowledge did these books of Thoth actually contain? Many scholars now suspect they were not single magical tomes, but compilations of hieroglyphic ritual texts, the same pyramid texts, coffin texts, and underworld books we find on sarcophagi and tomb walls. In other words, a priest's bookshelf may have been carved into stone. If so, then those legendary books were the core manuals of the mystery schools, used to train pharaohs and priests to navigate the Duat. They were never meant for casual reading. They were scripts for spoken rituals, passwords for invisible gates, and diagrams for the soul's ascent. Which leaves us with a haunting question. If even the ancients spoke of hidden books and secret scripts, are we today only reading the outer shelf of a much deeper library carved into stone? Cracking the stone, not the spell. Rosetta, Champollion, and our blind spots. To reach that deeper library, our story has to pass through a single, very famous doorway, a broken slab of black granodiorite pulled from the Egyptian sand in 1799, the Rosetta Stone. Did you know it was found not in a tomb, but in the walls of a military fort, reused like ordinary building material? On its surface, the mystery schools of Egypt suddenly met the bureaucrats of empire. The same decree, carved 3 times, flowing Greek, quick cursive demotic, and the older sacred hieroglyphs. For thousands of years, no one in the Mediterranean world could read those tiny carved birds and snakes. Now, for the first time, scholars had a parallel text, a key. Decades later, Jean-François Champollion used that key like an initiate decoding a ritual. He focused on royal cartouches, those oval rings around pharaohs' names. By matching them to the Greek text, he realized something shocking for his time. Hieroglyphs were not just mystical pictures. Many were phonetic signs, standing for consonant sounds. Others were logograms, whole words in a single symbol. And at the ends of words, silent determinatives whispered what kind of thing was being described: God, city, action, ritual. Suddenly, names like Ramses and Ptolemy emerged. Historical events, tax decrees, temple donations, basic religious formulas about offerings and the afterlife could be read aloud again. Old legends tell a different story about this moment, as if a spell had been broken and Egypt itself began to speak. But what really happened is more complicated, because from the beginning, European scholars treated hieroglyphs as a code that had to be translated into their own categories: history, theology, grammar, references to Heka. Words of power were filed under magic and quietly downgraded. Multi-layered symbolism was trimmed into neat paragraphs. If a text spoke of statues that breathe or names that open gates, those lines were explained away as poetic exaggeration, not technical instructions. Yet, the language keeps resisting. Certain words refuse to flatten. Ka, often rendered as life force or double, behaves in the texts like a second body that can eat offerings and attend rituals. Ba, translated as soul, is drawn as a bird with a human head, able to leave the tomb and journey through the duat. Ah, called affective spirit, appears when a being has been successfully transformed, radiant and dangerous. And Heka is not merely magic, it is described as a cosmic principle, the very power that makes rituals work and gods effective. Each time we say soul, spirit, or magic, we simplify a network of functions the priests treated as precise as astronomy. Whole passages become phonetically readable, yet conceptually unread. We can sound them out, but do we actually know what kind of knowledge is being transmitted? Most importantly, our tools of translation were built inside a worldview that does not believe words can alter reality. But what happens when we stand before temple walls where every line was carved as an instrument, a ritual technology designed to do exactly that? Walls that refuse to speak clearly, pyramid texts and enigmatic inscriptions. When we step closer to the carved walls, the mystery deepens instead of clearing. Some of the most ancient inscriptions in the world speak loudly in stone, yet refuse to tell us exactly what they mean. Did you know the oldest large religious corpus on Earth is hidden inside pyramids, deep in the chambers of Unas, Teti, and other Old Kingdom pharaohs? The pyramid texts climb the walls in vertical bands. To modern Egyptologists, these are spells for the afterlife. But when scholars translate them, they often end up with 3 or 4 competing versions of the same line, and no agreement on which one is right. On the surface, the grammar often works. Sentences have subjects, verbs, and objects. Yet the ideas feel like they were imported from another universe. One spell describes the dead king climbing a staircase made of stars. Another, the infamous cannibal hymn, shows the pharaoh hunting and eating the gods, swallowing their magic and their hearts to steal their power. Are these literal visions of the duat, ritual metaphors, or something closer to a technical manual for transforming consciousness? For thousands of years, priests chanted these words in darkness. Today, experts debate whether a single coherent narrative even exists. Some passages read like a journey map. Others feel like fragments of a lost curriculum, transformation formulas that trigger images rather than neat stories. We can pronounce the lines, but what really happened in the minds of those who heard them? Later, the coffin texts and the Book of the Dead expanded this hidden library. The same core spells appear again, now spread across wooden coffins and papyrus scrolls, with new scenes and instructions. Yet even here, determinatives and rare signs twist the meaning. A single unspoken symbol at the end of a word might show a man, a god, a star, or a coiled serpent, shifting the whole flavor of a sentence. Scholars argue line by line. Is this a simple door or a gate of the underworld? Is that breath or a secret name for a current of spiritual energy? Then, in certain temples at Abydos, Edfu, and Dendera, the language itself becomes a maze. Scribes use cryptographic or enigmatic hieroglyphs, signs fused together, reversed or replaced with visual puns. According to the stories, these were written for initiates, not for the public. You can sometimes read them phonetically, but the layout forms a puzzle, as if the wall is saying, only those who already know may truly understand. Here, the pattern breaks. What if these were never meant to be read like prose at all? What if they were ritual scripts, visual labyrinths, mnemonic devices guiding trained minds through inner chambers and gates of the duat? If so, then our translations may be grammatically correct and completely missing the point. In the next section, we'll find out together what happens when we stop treating these texts as books and start seeing them as living technologies of initiation. Scanning the stone. Modern technology meets ancient mystery as living technologies of initiation. And now, those technologies are being scanned, sliced, and x-rayed in ways the ancient priests could never have imagined. Did you know that in 2017, a project called Scan Pyramids used cosmic ray muon tomography to peer through the Great Pyramid stone, like a medical CT scan? The result shocked everyone. A previously unknown void, at least 30 meters long, hidden above the Grand Gallery, sealed for thousands of years. Imagine drifting through that darkness, a long, silent cavity suspended in millions of tons of limestone. No obvious entrance, no carved doorway, just a secret volume of space, hanging like a thought the pharaohs never finished. What was meant to happen there? Chanting? Initiations? Or something even stranger that left no visible trace on the walls at all? The Great Pyramid is not alone. Near Saqqara, where underground galleries already twist beneath the sand, new scanning surveys have detected anomalies that look very much like tunnels and side chambers branching off from known corridors. We picture narrow passageways where a grown person has to crawl, ceilings pressing inches above the back, the air cool and heavy with stone dust. Some walls are bare, as if the mystery was in the darkness itself. Others are packed from floor to ceiling with dense hieroglyphs, lines of gods, gates, and ritual scenes marching into the black. High-resolution laser scans of temple walls at places like Karnak and Dendera reveal something else. Layers. Under raking light and 3D models, faint outlines appear beneath the carvings we see today. Figures recut, phrases shifted, gates added or erased. Multispectral photography goes further, pulling hidden ink from papyri that look blank to the naked eye. Suddenly, erased columns of hieroglyphs flare back into view, like ghosts of older teachings that someone tried to overwrite. These are palimpsests, texts written, scraped away, and written again. But what really happened here? Are we looking at simple corrections or at an evolving curriculum inside the mystery schools? According to the stories, priests guarded words of power so carefully that even slight changes could alter a ritual's effect. When a gate name is swapped, or a spell to cross the duat is tightened, what kind of knowledge is being upgraded? Now imagine those hidden voids and tunnels as physical classrooms. A novice is led down blindfolded into a labyrinth that mirrors the underworld. On the walls, scenes from the Book of Coming Forth by Day glow in torchlight, each gate and guardian carved in stone. The initiate recites lines learned above ground, then must walk them step by step, as if the architecture itself were a three-dimensional script. Most importantly, this makes the new scans feel less like treasure hunts and more like blueprints. We are not just finding rooms. We may be uncovering training environments where consciousness was tested, dismantled, and rebuilt. But these discoveries leave us with a deeper question. As our machines peer further into the rock, are we opening classrooms for the dead or laboratories for the mind that we still do not know how to read? We'll find out together as we follow the traces of these hidden lessons into the next layer of the mystery, the meta question of secrecy. So now we reach the unsettling question beneath all the others. It's not just, what do these hieroglyphic texts say? It's, why build a whole language that can hide meaning in plain sight, on temple walls, sarcophagi, and underground chambers? Why turn writing itself into a filter that only a few could pass through? Did you know that some Egyptian inscriptions are written in what scholars literally call enigmatic or cryptographic hieroglyphs? On the surface, the signs look familiar, but then a bird stands in for a sound it never usually makes. A god's head replaces a simple letter, and a harmless-looking determinative quietly shifts a word from everyday speech into the realm of ritual danger. Most people could see the carving. Only initiates could read the spell. For thousands of years, that secrecy was not an accident. It was a technology of control. If only a narrow circle of pharaohs and priests could unlock the real meaning of the words, then only they could claim authority over the afterlife. Old legends tell a different story than our modern idea of religion. They describe schools where knowledge of the duat was guarded like a state secret, because to know the correct names, the correct gates, the correct passwords, was to hold power over the journey of every soul. According to the stories, words themselves were hekau, words of power. A spell carved on a sarcophagus was not a poetic comfort. It was a device. But what really happened if the wrong person used that device? Many traditions warned that rituals lose their force when exposed, that sacred formulas decay when repeated by the unprepared. If that was true, then hiding the real instructions behind layers of symbolic misdirection was not just elitism, it was protection of the dead, of the living, and of the rituals themselves. So we circle back to the core mystery and turn up the volume. What kind of knowledge did initiates receive in these hidden schools that was dangerous enough to encode in cryptographic hieroglyphs and then bury inside stone labyrinths? What did they practice in those dark chambers that could not be allowed to leak into ordinary speech? And most importantly, what did they think would happen if it did? The answer pulls us into their cosmology. Imagine believing that death is not an ending, but a precise, law-governed journey through the duat, a structured sequence of regions, gates, and guardians where every wrong turn has consequences. In that world, training for the afterlife becomes the highest form of education. A map of the underworld is not a metaphor, it is operational knowledge. Distort it, and you misguide a soul. Suddenly, the secrecy makes sense. Hieroglyphs become more than writing. They are travel documents, rehearsal scripts, and access codes for consciousness itself. To read them correctly is to rehearse the passage. To read them incorrectly might be to send a traveler into the dark without a guide. In the next part, we'll walk into that imagined landscape, the duat itself. 12 hours of night. Gates with names like blades. Guardians who only open to the right words. And carved between those signs on the wall, a final riddle that modern translation still has not fully solved. Mapping the duat, the Egyptian underworld, as a structured curriculum. To walk that landscape, the Egyptians believed, was not to fade into nothing. Death was not an ending. It was an entrance exam, a passage into a realm so detailed, so structured, that a soul without training would be lost almost immediately. They called it the duat, not a vague afterlife, but a vast underworld stretching beneath the horizon, mirroring and twisting the world we know. Imagine rivers of darkness where the water glows faintly like ink, fields of reeds that rustle without wind, caverns of fire that burn yet do not consume. Above it all, celestial boats glide across a midnight sky, carrying gods and the justified dead through the 12 hours of night. This was not random horror. This was curriculum. The duat was divided into sections, often described as hours, each with its own landscape, its own beings, its own tests. Did you know that some texts describe entire flotillas of solar boats passing through gate after gate, each one guarded by serpents, lions, or composite beings with names as sharp as blades? The Amduat, that which is in the Duat, and the Book of Gates read almost like secret travel manuals. Hour 1, the sun god enters the western horizon, greeted by welcoming deities. Hour 2, a region of swirling waters and hidden chambers. Hour 3, a desert of knives and coiled serpents. Each hour lists precise gods, demons, lakes, mounds, and stars, as if mapping an invisible geography that priests and pharaohs had to memorize. According to the stories, there were passwords for each gate, formulas for each guardian, ritual phrases that could disarm a serpent or calm a lake of fire. Most importantly, those phrases were not just spoken, they were written. The names of gates, the titles of guardians, the spells themselves were carved in hieroglyphs that combined sound signs, images, and determinatives to lock in layers of meaning. A gate might be written with a door sign, a coiled rope, and a knife, followed by a determinative showing a fortified enclosure. To read it phonetically was one level of knowledge. To feel what that cluster of images meant in the duat was another. Old legends tell a different story than a simple spelling system. They hint that pronouncing the name without the correct inner understanding could be dangerous. For thousands of years, initiates stood in dark temple chambers, reciting these names from walls and papyri, rehearsing the journey they believed awaited them. The duat becomes, in this light, a cosmic school or a labyrinth of lessons. Each turn requires the right response. Each encounter demands that the soul remember exactly what to say, what to recognize, and where to go next. But what really happened when those signs were spoken with full intention? Were the hieroglyphs simply instructions, or were they the very keys that shaped the path ahead? In the next section, we'll find out together how this writing may have been designed as a technology of consciousness, not just a record of belief. Words that weigh the heart, Heka, Ma'at, and the logic behind the spells. To the Egyptians, those signs were not just keys to memory, they were engines of power. When a priest spoke a line carved on stone, something invisible was expected to move. At the center of this hidden logic was Heka, not stage tricks, not illusion. Heka was the primordial force the gods themselves used to call the world into being. According to the stories, creation began when a divine being spoke, and reality obeyed. Words were not descriptions of the world, they were levers inside it. A name, an image, a carefully drawn glyph was a vessel carrying this power, like a charged object waiting to be activated by breath and voice. Did you know the Egyptians even had a special term for words of power? Hekau, used in rituals to steer the journey through the duat. In temple schools and inner chambers, pharaohs and priests learned that every syllable was a tool. A crocodile drawn on a wall was not a neutral picture. In the right context, it could attract, bind, or repel the dangerous forces that symbol embodied. To write was to participate in the same creative current that first lit the sky. Balancing this current was another principle. Ma'at, usually translated as truth, justice, or cosmic order, Ma'at was more than morality. It was the right arrangement of all things. We see it most clearly in the famous judgment scene. The dead stand before Osiris, while their heart is placed on a scale and weighed against the feather of Ma'at. Around them are gates, guardians, and watching deities. But notice what actually decides the outcome. Speech. The soul must recite the negative confessions, precise declarations of innocence, each addressed to a specific judge. I have not stolen. I have not lied. Names of gods, names of gates, names of one's own organs must be spoken correctly. In this mystery, the heart is measured not only by what was done, but by what can be said in alignment with Ma'at. Hieroglyphs quietly encode this dance between Heka and Ma'at. A simple word for to speak can end with a determinative of a seated man, signaling human conversation, or a seated god, signaling divine command. The spoken act is the same, but the level of reality it touches changes. The word for name might be written inside an oval cartouche, a protective loop of rope that seals and guards royal identity. Even silent signs at the end of words act as tiny judges, clarifying whether a term belongs to the realm of humans, gods, places, or the dead. In a world built from speech, precision was survival. Mispronounce a name, choose the wrong sign, or forget a single line in a spell, and the Heka embedded in that formula might misfire. A guardian at a gate in the duat might not recognize the traveler. A protective charm might fail to attach to the correct part of the soul. For thousands of years, this is why such knowledge was restricted, rehearsed in darkness, and guarded by temple rituals few ever saw. But here is the unsettling twist. We usually treat hieroglyphs as dead text, silent labels under glass. What if that very habit blinds us? What kind of language are we looking at if every sign was meant to be performed, not just read? Most importantly, what changes if we stop seeing these carvings as museum objects and start seeing them as active instruments in a cosmic drama that, in the Egyptian view, is still unfolding? In the next section, we'll find out together how this vision of living words might reframe the way we translate the secrets still sleeping on temple walls. Rehearsing death while alive, pharaohs, priests, and the training scripts. If hieroglyphs were living instruments in a cosmic drama, then here is the twist. The main actors did not wait for death to step on stage. The most advanced initiates, pharaohs, high priests, and select scribes rehearsed the afterlife while their hearts still beat. The duat was not only a destination, it was a curriculum. Did you know that the earliest pyramid texts, carved deep inside royal tombs, read almost like stage directions for a soul? A king is told where to stand, which gate to approach, which god to address by name. Now imagine the pharaoh, still alive, walking through a temple corridor painted with the same scenes. Torches flicker. The 12 hours of the night stretch along the walls. At each doorway, he pauses, reciting the names and passwords that the glyphs whisper back to him. For thousands of years, this was the hidden work of Egypt's mystery schools. Pharaohs were not just rulers, they were archetypal initiates. Their pyramids and tombs were engraved with spells from the pyramid texts, later the coffin texts, then the Book of the Dead, the Book of Coming Forth by Day. These were not random prayers. They were a scripted journey, instructions for transforming a fragile human consciousness into an awakened, radiant Ach. Around them moved the priests, the technicians of the sacred. During the opening of the mouth ritual, a priest would stand before a mummy or statue, holding an adses, speaking precise hieroglyphic formulas. Incense curls upward. The same words he chants are carved in tiny glyphs along the sarcophagus, as if the stone itself is repeating the ritual. According to the stories, the goal was literal, to reopen the senses of the dead. But what really happened when those words were drilled into the memories of the living who performed them again and again? In the House of Life, the temple library and scriptorium, scribes copied these texts until the signs lived behind their eyes. Rows of papyri, columns of glyphs, determinatives hinting at underworld meanings we still debate. A young scribe traces the sign for gate, then the name of a serpent guardian, then a phrase of praise. Over years, the inked symbols turn into a mental map. The duat is no longer just painted on walls. It is carried inside the mind. This is where memorization becomes something far stranger than rote learning. In a landscape like the duat, where forms shift and darkness confuses, written scrolls are useless. Only what the soul has absorbed can guide it. Every gate demands a name. Every lake of fire has a counterspell. The initiate trains so that, in the most disorienting moment of existence, the right sequence of signs and sounds rises spontaneously from within. Old legends tell a different story than simple funerary rites. They hint that some initiates practiced dying before death, entering trance in dark chambers, using these hieroglyphic scripts as launch codes for journeys out of the body. But if these texts were training programs for consciousness, what kind of knowledge marked the higher levels? Most importantly, How far did the real initiations go beyond the carved lines we can still see, into practices that were never written down at all? In the next part, we'll find out together how deep this ladder of initiation might descend beneath the stone. Through 12 gates, the hieroglyphic spine of the underworld journey, those carved lines were not just lessons about leaving the body. They were a ladder of gates. And in Egypt's most secret manuals of the night, that ladder runs through exactly 12. In works like the Amduat and the Book of Gates, the underworld is divided into 12 hours, the 12 chambers of the night. Each hour is a self-contained world. A stretch of desert or water, a field of stars, a cavern full of coiled serpents. At the boundary of every hour stands a gate. At every gate, a challenge. Did you know these are not loose myths, but tightly structured journeys? The sun god, or the soul identified with the sun, sails through the duat on a bark. At each gate, guardian deities appear, snake-necked lions, knife-wielding women, composite beings with human torsos and scorpion tails. They do not simply let the traveler pass. They demand a name, a title, a password. The pattern repeats with ritual precision. Encounter, question, response, reward. A guardian calls out, "Tell me my name." The initiate must answer with the exact phrase, the hidden epithet, sometimes a string of seemingly bizarre images. Then comes a spell or declaration, a piece of memorized knowledge that aligns the traveler with ma'at, with order. If the words match the gate opens. Safe passage, new allies, renewed life force. If not, the text leaves the failure largely unspoken, which makes it feel even more dangerous. This is where the hieroglyphs themselves become a kind of spine for the whole journey. On tomb walls, we see sequences that look almost like lesson blocks. First, the gate's name in hieroglyphs, then the names of its guardians, then the required spells. Often, a vignette shows the bark approaching, the guardians lined up in rows, labels pointing to each figure. It reads like a syllabus of the night, a curriculum of encounters that initiates had to master long before the final exam of death. For thousands of years, priests copied these sequences with obsessive care, because in this system, a single sign could be the difference between life and annihilation. Change a determinative, the tiny unspoken sign that classifies a word, and a gate can become a knife, a field can become a tomb. Misread a coiled serpent sign, and the phrase that should pacify a guardian might instead provoke it. Old legends tell a different story about mistakes in these rituals, not just wrong answers, but souls lost in side corridors of the duat, trapped in regions without names. Most importantly, this demand for precision is why many of these texts still resist us. We can pronounce the words, but what really happened in the minds of those who use them as training? Some passages are damaged, breaking off just as a new mystery is introduced. Others hint that the rest of the teaching was given orally in hidden chambers, never carved at all, according to the stories. The written journey through 12 gates was only the visible half of a much deeper initiation, one that may continue in ways our dictionaries are not yet built to see. A technology of consciousness? Comparing mystery traditions, according to the stories, the written journey was only half the path. But here's the strange part. Egypt was not alone in using words and symbols as guides for the dead. All across the ancient world, we find mystery schools doing something eerily similar. In Greece, initiates of the Eleusinian mysteries prepared for death with secret dramas, torches, and sacred grain. Some were buried with tiny Orphic gold tablets pressed to their chests, etched with instructions for the underworld, which spring not to drink from, what names to say at which gates, how to answer the guardians. Far away in the Himalayas, Tibetan monks still read the Bardo Thirdal, the so-called Tibetan Book of the Dead, aloud beside the dying, guiding consciousness through terrifying visions and dazzling lights. Different cultures, different gods, but the same pattern, a scripted journey, passwords, and a map for the soul. So what made Egypt's approach so unique? Did you know that in Egypt, the book was not only a scroll? The entire temple became a book you could walk inside. Walls, ceilings, floors, statues, even the shafts of light and the echo of a chant were part of one designed environment. Image, architecture, and hieroglyphic text fused into a single training device. The initiate did not just read about the afterlife. They rehearsed it with their whole body. Imagine entering a dark corridor where the ceiling shows the star goddess Nut swallowing the sun, while the walls list hymns and spells, and the very shape of the passage narrows like a throat. Every step, every carved sign, every flicker of the torch is a line in a living manuscript. This was not passive decoration. It was a technology of consciousness. Most of us grew up thinking hieroglyphs were just an early writing system. But what really happened if each sign was engineered to work on several levels at once? One symbol could give a sound value, paint a picture, hint at a myth, and end with a determinative that silently tells the mind, this belongs to the realm of gods, or this is about the body, or this concerns the afterlife. A single word becomes a compressed ritual. Take the Jed pillar. Officially, it is the backbone of Osiris, a symbol of stability. But carved on tomb walls, raised in festivals, and spoken in certain chants, it links spine, resurrection, and cosmic order in one image sound gesture package. Or the Rosetta Stone, a black slab from Memphis, where creation is described as a god thinking, speaking, and bringing reality into being. The text survives. The deeper mechanics, how priests may have used specific tones and hand movements with those words, remain a mystery. Even the opening of the mouth ceremony, performed on statues and mummies, shows this layered design. Priests touched the lips and eyes with ritual tools while reciting hieroglyphic formulas that opened the senses for the next world. Sound, symbol, and precise motion acted together like a coded sequence. So we face an unsettling possibility. If hieroglyphs were crafted to speak at once to gods, to the dead, and to the subconscious mind of the living initiate, can any purely literal translation ever be correct? Or is the real reading not what appears in a dictionary, but what their symbols awaken in us when we stand in those chambers, under those carved stars? In a moment, we'll push this even further and ask whether some hieroglyphs were never meant to be fully read at all. What the stone still withholds, unreadable layers and modern intuition, So what happens when even that layered way of reading breaks down, when the stone seems to speak, but we no longer know what it's saying? Some of the most haunting hieroglyphs are not the ones we can't sound out, but the ones we can pronounce clearly and still cannot truly understand. Did you know that the oldest sacred corpus on earth, the pyramid texts, is full of these? Certain spells in the dark chambers of Unas and Teti read like verbal mazes. We can follow the phonetic trail, but the path of meaning twists. Sky ladders that are also ribs, coffins that are also boats, pharaohs who become a flame and swallow the gods. On the Shabaka stone, dense lines compress whole cosmologies into wordplay, puns that fuse creation, kingship, and the hidden workings of the heart. Then there are the cryptographic temple inscriptions. According to the stories, priests in places like Edfu and Dendera rewrote ordinary signs into elaborate mutated forms, turning a simple word into a puzzle of overlapping gods, animals, and weapons. These are not mistakes, they are deliberate encryptions. Some we can untangle, others still sit there half-solved, like locked gates in the middle of a sacred journey. Most importantly, the key concepts at the center of Egyptian spiritual technology refuse to shrink to a neat dictionary entry. Ka, the life force double. Ba, the mobile soul bird. Ach, the radiant transfigured being. Heka, the power that makes rituals actually work. We use these labels, but what really happened in the mystery schools when priests invoked them? What kind of knowledge was being handled when a pharaoh's ka was strengthened or an ak was made effective among the stars? Part of the resistance is physical: broken walls, missing columns, erased names. But a deeper problem is that we no longer share the world that produced these words. We do not stand in those chambers as initiates, after days of fasting, hearing a living priest explain the secret commentary that may never have been written down. Our modern languages treat words as labels. The Egyptians treated words as events. Some Egyptologists openly admit this limit. There are lines we can recite out loud, yet only guess at in meaning. Multiple plausible translations sit side by side, each revealing a different layer: political, cosmic, ritual, psychological. Which one is right? Or were these texts designed to work on all those levels at once? So here is a gentle experiment. When glyphs appear on screen, pause. Sketch 1. Let your eyes trace the falcon, the water ripple, the seated god. Before hearing the scholarly reading, ask, what does this feel like? Heavy, sharp, protective? This is not to replace Egyptology, but to remember that for thousands of years, these were living symbols, not dead code. Because if the deepest messages of hieroglyphs demand both rigorous scholarship and an initiate's imagination, then a final question opens before us. What would it mean now to become humble students of this secret language? And where might that kind of learning lead us next? Walking out of the temple, what the unreadable glyphs ask of us. So what would it mean now to become humble students of this secret language? And where might that kind of learning lead us next? As we step back from the walls, the whole journey of this episode comes into focus. We started with the myth that hieroglyphs were cracked once and for all, a closed case filed under Champollion and the Rosetta Stone. But what really happened? We discovered unreadable spells in the pyramid texts, temple inscriptions in cryptographic signs, and passages where every word is known, yet the meaning still slips through our fingers. Did you know that for thousands of years, these same walls were treated not as decorations, but as classrooms for the soul? The columns, the ceilings, the hidden chambers, all carried lessons. Priests walked past scenes of the duat, gates of fire, and boats of the sun god, as if they were moving through a living textbook. According to the stories, the temple itself was a mystery school, and the hieroglyphs were its core curriculum. Along the way, we saw how the triumph of Rosetta opened the doors, but not every room. Sound signs gave us names and dates, determinatives hinted at context. Yet concepts like Heka, Maat, Ka, Ba, and Ak remained half-lit, more like forces than tidy nouns. Most importantly, we realized that hieroglyphs were never just about recording events. They were about shaping reality, guiding consciousness, and rehearsing the afterlife, line by line, spell by spell. Maybe that is why some messages remain opaque, not because the scribes were unclear, but because we no longer share the worldview that made their language transparent. Old legends tell a different story than our modern textbooks. Words were beings, images were engines, and a single carved sign could act as a tiny ritual, humming quietly on the stone. So what kind of knowledge are we really touching when we translate these texts? When we stand in front of an unreadable passage, are we facing a failure of scholarship or a reminder that we are peering into someone else's sacred training manual? These unreadable glyphs invite a different attitude: respect instead of conquest, patience instead of quick answers, and the humility to say, here, the ancient teachers are still ahead of us. That is where the invitation begins. In future episodes, when a wall appears on screen, pause for a moment. Let your eyes rest on a single sign, a feather, an eye, a boat gliding across a line that might be water, or might be the horizon between worlds. Maybe sketch it, sit with it, then look up multiple translations of the same spell and notice how the meaning shifts. We'll find out together how each version opens a slightly different gate. In doing that, we stop being tourists and start becoming modern initiates, slowly learning a forgotten language of the sacred. Not to copy the rituals of the priests, but to remember that language itself can be a temple, and writing can be a journey. So imagine this. We walk out of the temple at night. The last torch goes out behind us. The desert is wide and silent, the air cooling around the stones. Above, the sky is a black sea scattered with stars, the same stars the pharaohs watched when they trained to enter the duat. The walls are now behind us, but the glyphs are still there, drinking in the starlight, whispering across 3,000 years. The stone is still speaking. We are only beginning to hear it. And the next step in decoding this mystery is not only in the lab or the library, but in the way we listen together every time those ancient signs appear and ask us quietly to read with more than just our eyes.